Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Thank you very much for the feedback. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for being here today at the first meeting of our Inside Modern Heritage Network. I'm Luca Rossato. I'm going to introduce this small event. I'm the coordinator of the network and full-time researcher at the Department of Architecture, University of Ferrara. Many thanks to the speakers that accepted today to share the ideas, thoughts, projects, research activities with us today, and thanks to the attendees that are showing interest into this topic. The program is quite dense. We will have a keynote speech by professors Meenakshi Jain and Kulbhushan Jain, and then 6 contributions from by other colleagues from Portugal to Brazil, Italy, and India. And then I hope a small debate at the conclusion of the event. Few words about my research topics. I focused my activities on 20th century architectures and vernacular architecture. So usually, if you see me around in conference, in paper, I'm basically dedicated to these 2 areas from obviously my point of view, from my scientific point of view, which is more related to documentation, survey, awareness raising, enhancement of these 2 types of cultural heritage. Actually, we are today discussing about modern heritage because it's a kind of cultural heritage usually all over the world in a bad state of conservation. This is due to different, obviously, causes. In some countries, climate, it's actually an enemy for this kind of architectures. In other situations, there were some controversial restoration projects, conservation projects. In other less fortunate cases, these kind of architecture are heavily hybridized with, let's say, contemporary architectures. And unfortunately, in some cases, we already experimented the loss of this cultural heritage with demolition of houses and buildings from the 20th century. So some issues to work on for sure. On one hand are to explore the publications, doing bibliographic research, to identify case studies on which focus our attention, to talk with the stakeholders on the conservation approaches, for example, but also analyze materials, restoration market, doing a lot of site visits, because it's only visiting this kind of architecture that it's possible to find a way to preserve them. On the other hand, we have to apply some technologies on this cultural heritage, from 3D survey to 3D modeling, also operating technology transfer towards, for example, public bodies. We have to create accessible databases for the maintenance of these buildings, able to exploit diagnostic analysis and possibly effective protocols. My personal research during the PhD involved basically these 4 areas: the South America, India, Europe, and US. And thanks to this net of cooperation, I had the idea to put all together all these colleagues that became actually friends together in an idea of a network, an international network on these topics. Because actually, from my experience, we have to be aware that the amount of buildings built along the 20th century are of outstanding values. Yes, some of them are already protected by UNESCO and other bodies, but the majority, it's not protected at all, and we are losing a lot of this cultural heritage. As I told you, my research was based basically in Brazil and India with the identification on different case studies, on which I applied three basically filters of what I called level of technology or level of knowledge. So basically a first level, low level of knowledge based on the analysis of this building through to the drawings and other schemes. And then a more accurate analysis on 25 buildings in these countries through BIM modeling techniques. These two first filters allow me to highlight the fragility of this cultural heritage. I really understood that there is a danger of loss of memory, and we have to work for the awareness on this cultural heritage. And it was only with the third filter, the surveying, that was able to apply to some, only on some buildings due to the high cost of this operation, and that I identified some degradation problems, and I suggested to use this documentation approaches towards the conservation of these buildings. Basically, I developed some filters. You can find all this information in my book that I publish on the website, as other colleagues are doing. Later, I will show you also this part of the website of our net. So the first filter allowed me to understand the level of danger of each building analyzed, highlighting good factors such as the restoration activities or the maintenance activities, and bad factors such as the degradation by use, the heritage hybridization, the lack of documentation or lack of protection by public body. Then I was able to develop a second analysis, a second filter. This one was carried out taking advantage of the BIM models of these architectures. The factors are divided in three areas: urban factors, natural factors, and technological factors. And the nine factors, an evaluation of these 9 factors allowed me to have a very precise idea of a kind of priority list of intervention on these buildings. You see that the caveat chart show us very quickly the most problematic buildings and the less the most conserved buildings. Even if you see in some cases there is still danger for the conservation of these buildings. So basically, this documentation approach was integrated to have a summary, a graphical summary of the state of conservation of each buildings. So I created this database that I hope to put online to be shared with all with the public. And then on the most critical buildings was applied a third filter. So that was the application of advanced technologies such as laser scanner technologies in order to have some outputs basically focused for the restoration. Here you find some activities that we carried out on Rino Levi house in Brazil, or the famous Casa das Canoas near Rio de Janeiro. Using this advanced technology, I was able to identify deterioration pathologies, also in cooperation with the other team of my research group, such as Federica Maglietti. Here you see a section of Casa di Vidro by Lina Bobardi in São Paulo, with identification of cracks and other problems related to the conservation of concrete and stones. And here you see the facade of the Faculty of Architecture building in São Paulo, urban architecture building in São Paulo, with analysis carried out with Federica of the pathology affecting the concrete of the facade. So basically, after this 3-4 year strong activities on the field in these countries, I think it's time to put all together and try to build a network, an international network, able to involve academics, institutions that share the same interest toward modern heritage, but a different layer. Inside is the acronyms of International Network for Studies, Investigation, Documentation, and Enhancement of Modern Heritage. So you see the approach is very wide. We are so open, different layers of input. So the international members are basically with an interdisciplinary approach, okay? And they offer the skills and expertise to achieve the goal of promoting innovation, basically for the documentation of 20th century cultural heritage. We are all aware that DocuMomo is working very hard on this field. So I think that we need to maintain our level of analysis very high with a very specific topics. And I hope that through these meetings, we will be able also to find different research groups, people interested in developing research activities on a peculiar topic. For example, protocols for the prioritization of intervention on this kind of cultural heritage. The members from New Zealand, for example, are working on the sustainability aspect of the 20th century buildings. So really, we need to focus our attention to find innovative way to work on this cultural heritage beside the plain documentation. As you know, we have a website which was created in 2 months with the cooperation of some members. And let's see if I can access quickly to the website before concluding the intervention. The idea was to have a site describing our activities, where I already received some letter from a partner institution. That's good because we can, in this way, we can ask for funding, for funds. So it's a good thing. From Brazil, India, and I hope to receive more letters from the university. But beside this, we are people dedicated to the topic. So on the website, you can find all the members from USA, New Zealand, Brazil, Portugal, Italy, obviously, Russia, etc. And I hope that in 1 year we will be, the double, okay, people involved in this. On the activities and events, we are going to see what's happening on the modern heritage. So not only our meeting, but also other interest meeting. And I'm in touch with the Getty Foundation in Los Angeles. I spent time there, and they are happy, of this initiative. Unfortunately, it's very early there now. It's 5 in the morning, I think, or 4 in the morning. So they were not able to join. On the research and publication, after the suggestion of the colleague Michele and Fatima Kanata, we had also a part of the website where the public can download for free our publication. So you can find my book on Brazil and India, conference poster, other book you see on the modern architecture in Porto, on Oscar Niemeyer by the colleague Luis Florio in Mackenzie, who is teaching today, and they sent a video for their presentation. So we are open for new members. You see, you have to send a CV to this email for asking for the to be member. So we have to grow for sure, but I think it's a good good start for our activity. That's it. I think I was, yeah, more or less in time. Perfect. I'd like to leave the stage to two professors from India for our keynote speech. The title is Primary Institutes of the 60s. Meenakshi Jain and Kulbhushan Jain. They are one of the most prominent conservation architects in India, and also academic. Specifically, Professor Meenakshi Jain was also awarded for her work on the Nagpur Fort with the UNESCO Award of Excellence, and also nominated for the Aga Khan Award in 2013. They both were teaching and are teaching at the CEPT University in Ahmedabad, one of the most important university for architecture in the country. Professor Kulbhushan as well had 3 UNESCO awards for the conservation work at Jaisalmer, Nagpur, and Merang Fort. He has more than 40 years of academic and professional activities. So you can understand why I asked them to be our keynote speakers today for their huge effort for the conservation of cultural heritage. And they were lucky to be in touch with the master that came in Ahmedabad, the couple Eames, Louis Kahn. So I think they can really told us some stories about this amazing past cooperating with these masters. Okay, I think professors, the stage is yours. I close.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you.
Hello, Alessandro. I see that Alessandro joined us. So all the panelists are here today. Very good. So please, go ahead.
Okay, Luca.
Yes.
This your excellent introduction to the topic, and very, very relevant, I feel. But my presentation is most disjointed. Whatever I thought, I just noted down, and we'll just go page to page. Okay?
Okay, great.
The famous, exceptionally designed, iconic buildings built in 20th century with cement, concrete, steel, and glass are now cracking and showing age. That's what you said, right? A very different construction than 600-year-old monuments, which were built with the natural materials, stone and wood. These modern buildings are representative of the architectural creativity of the time and must be conserved. These buildings are understood as idea generators, exploring nuances offered by new materials and techniques. More research is required for identification of causes of deterioration. Research will help find suitable and relevant solutions. The time between the building's creation and its protection has never been as compressed as it is for the heritage of modern era, writes the Susan McDonnell of the Getty Conservation Institute. Next. Like Bauhaus, Gropius's Bauhaus building was only 40 years old when it was listed in 1964. And then it was repaired and reused as a hostel. Similar thing about Sydney Opera House. Attempt to inscribe the Sydney Opera House began just 11 years after its completion. Eames House is being conserved now, 70 years after its construction. It was after 1990s that the conservation of modern heritage emerged as a distinct area of practice. Now, right now, there are a lot of organizations which support this idea and includes Docomomo, UNESCO, Getty, etc., World Monument Fund. But it must be remembered that each building is different, should be conserved specially according to its own personality. All conservation works must be done by an experienced expert. Next. Here I am talking of two buildings. One is a Salk laboratory by Louis Kahn, completed in '65. Right now, the Getty has partnered with the Salk laboratories to address the aging teak windows, which are one of the major elements of architectural character. And second case is the house of Charles and Ray Eames. The house has been maintained by the Eames Foundation and Getty under 250-year project. It includes the total site for this initiative. They have gotten $250,000. To start with, they are making the plan. Incidentally, it is a privilege to have known both these architects myself. Next. Now I would like to say that I met number of masters at the National Design Institute, Ahmedabad. At that time, Gira and Gautam Sarabhai had invited Louis Kahn, Charles and Ray Eames, Fry Otto, Nakashima, Italian architect Perasutti, Armin Hoffman, and many others. Also met Luis Barragan in Mexico and Lady Helen Hamlin at Nagaur, Rajasthan, and Kochi. The first picture is Charles is showing, talking to us at NID. The central picture is his exhibition design of My India and My People. And third picture is he and Ray are taking our pictures because they wanted to show the Indian marriage in the exhibition. And we posed as an actors. In the year 64, 65, after my graduation, joined NID as a junior architect. Here I met the masters who were invited by brother-sister duo, Gira and Gautam Sarabhai. Connecting with them has left a deep impression on my life. NID, the first design school in India, was a kind of experiment at that time. Well-known designers were invited from abroad. One of them were Charles and Ray Eames, exceptional designers who designed an exhibition, My India and My People. They were multi-talented and did all kinds of work, even photographic, anything. All these focused people worked long hours on the projects, believed in making scale models to envision their thoughts, their own individual logic, which was very special, manifested in iconic designs. Design development was one important aspect. Here is a Barragan house. The first picture is showing I'm talking to him and in his courtyard. And the second picture is his courtyard just 1 week before. And see the difference, it is not well maintained. House was very modern at that time, using elements like stair going nowhere. He was a religious person and also liked horses. He fell from one and was on crutches in the picture. For institutes landscaping, he said, "Let the earth meet the sky," resulting into a large coat. The second two pictures are shown of Armin Hoffman, the graphic designer from Basel. Armin Hoffman, graphic designer, came from Basel, could not speak English. He, besides the graphics, taught us hand movements. But his exercises in squares and colors between black and white was amazing. Basel. Excuse me. I don't speak so much anyway. So Khan at master's class jury and seeing my drawings. Khan at breakfast with us and peeling an apple and white butter. Between 1970 and 74, whenever he came to Ahmedabad, he used to have breakfast with us, KB Jain and myself only. He would tell stories and often talk about his project's details, like how he will resolve problems of fallen leaves from the coat that he was designing. He would insist on removing an apple peel in single strand. He often gave a challenge to himself and worked for its success and fulfillment. We enjoyed his company. This is Helen Hamlin. She feels conservation makes a building sustainable for future with added value. The picture down is a earlier central area of Nagaur Fort. The larger picture is when it was conserved. Of course, this is not a modern building. Last 15 years, I worked with Lady Helen Hamlin on the conservation of ranwas, gardens, and fountains at Nagaur Fort. She believes in enhancing the character of building to be conserved and give something more as an adaptive reuse. The 84-year-old Lady Helen is leading advocate of heritage conservation. She says, "I treat every building like a person. Such projects are opportunities." Next. This is to sum up, but this already Luca has said. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Meenakshi. It was very amazing to see how many masters we have met in your career. So I think that Professor Kulbushan can go ahead. Then we can have some questions for you, probably.
Just a minute, Luca.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Good evening and good afternoon for you. I'm talking about three premier institutes of Ahmedabad, which were built in the 1960s. And actually that was a turning point in a lot of thinking. It impacted management, it impacted design, and it impacted architecture. So this is what the presentation is. Now, my introduction is for the purpose of a focused discussion. We accept architecture generally covered under modernism. a period marked from the end of 19th century to the major part of the 20th century. Substantial development of this movement found manifestations in Europe and the United States. The Crystal Palace, designed by Sir Joseph Paxton, housed the Great Exhibition of 1851 in Hyde Park, London. Built with glass and prefabricated cast iron components, the structure was shifted to Sydenham Hill, Bromley in 1852-1854. A fire destroyed it in 1936. Its rebuilding did not materialize. There was a lot of effort and a lot of discussion to reconstruct it. For many architects and historians, Crystal Palace is the birth of modern architecture. This can be debated, but I personally endorse this view. In the Western world, there are numerous examples of modern architecture that is recognized for its enormous value as heritage. Few examples are selected to highlight that aspect. House called E1027 by Irish designer Eileen Gray was built in 1929 on the French Riviera. Corbusier is said to have a love-hate relationship with the house. He even built a one-room cottage next to it. The house was abandoned and fell into ruins. In 1999, it was bought by conservationists who meticulously restored it at a huge cost of time and money. So you can see the exterior. Now, this is 1929. And it is interesting to see what Corbusier himself was doing between 1925 and 1930, including the Stein House. So this is very strongly contemporary and very strongly impacting Corbusier. Corbusier is said to have stayed in this house for some time after the lady left and her friend was continuing to stay here. But, and he painted some 8 to 10 murals on the walls, which Eileen did not like, but they were there. Next. The two famous pavilions, one by Mies van der Rohe, built in 1929, the same time when that Eileen house was built, for the International Exposition in Barcelona, and the other one was a sculpture display by Aldo van Eyck in 1965. Both were demolished after the events were over. However, there was a great recognition of the quality these two pavilions gave to the world. The Barcelona pavilion was rebuilt in 1986, exactly as it was. And the sculpture pavilion was rebuilt in 2006 as part of the Kroller-Müller Museum in Netherlands. The top two pictures are Barcelona pavilion, very well known, and the sculpture pavilion in the lower two pictures. Two famous buildings by Le Corbusier, also UNESCO World Heritage Sites, have been restored and protected with utmost care. Built in 1955, Rochamps was designated as World Heritage in 1967. La Tour was also initiated around the same time as Rochamps, but took much longer to build. La Tour was completed in 1961, renovated in 1981, and designated in the World Heritage in 2016, along with several other works of Le Corbusier. A total of 17 buildings of Le Corbusier are World Heritage Sites. The top two were Rochamps and lower were La Tour. In July 2019, 8 projects by Frank Lloyd Wright were designated as World Heritage Sites by UNESCO. This includes the Falling Waters and Guggenheim Museum, very famous projects by Frank Lloyd Wright. Early 50s of the last century also marked by the building of a new capital for the state of Punjab in India. Le Corbusier developed the master plan jointly with Maxwell Fry and James Drew. He also built the Capitol complex, the seat of government. This complex is also UNESCO designated World Heritage Site, the only modern heritage in India. Now, the impact of modernism in India was felt only toward the middle of the 20th century, when some of the architects studied and worked in the West. First one to study with Walter Gropius at Harvard was A.P. Kanminde, followed by Charles Correa, who studied at MIT, and then B.V. Doshi, who worked with Le Corbusier. However, the first modernist building, Golconda in Pondicherry, was completed in 1945. This first concrete building in the country was designed by American architect Antoine Raymond and later completed by George Nakashima, who also became a disciple of Sri Aurobindo, the founder of the ashram at Pondicherry. The building was designed as dormitory for the devotees of Sri Aurobindo. Nakashima, a great furniture designer, was later associated with National Institute of Design at Ahmedabad in the initial years of the development. His future and other details in wood at the ashram are remarkable, including the louvers. However, it was after the independence of India in 1947 that some architects who went abroad to study architecture returned and started building in the country. First modern building by A.P. Kanminde, Indian architect Atira, Ahmedabad Textile Industry Research Association, was started in 1950 and completed in 1954. Nuances of the international style can be seen on this building. The well-educated, rich industrialists of Ahmedabad moved on with their philanthropy for the cause of research and education. They succeeded in establishing several institutions of high standard. They also invited Le Corbusier to design for them. Corbusier built 4 buildings in Ahmedabad, 2 public buildings and 2 private residences. All 4 buildings need immediate attention for conservation. And on the left is the Kanminde building, which was 1950 to 54. And right is of Millowners Association building in Ahmedabad. Now I will use this, further discussion will be on 3 institutes. The first one is the Indian Institute of Management at Ahmedabad, architect Louis Kahn, year of construction 1961 onwards. Founders were industrialists and scientists of Ahmedabad and the government of India. Supported by Harvard Business School for its academic programming. Conservation consultant is Brinda Somaya and team, which you can see here because they have already done some work. Recently, this is a difficult building to conserve, which I'll discuss a little later. So recently there was a proposal to demolish 16 dormitories from this academic campus. But there was an international hue and cry, and so that has been shared. They are not going to demolish, to reconstruct new ones, but they are now working on conservation of those 16 dormitories. Next. Now for the work that they have already done, including the reconstruction of flat arches and other brickwork, they used all modern possible techniques. The institute's campus was conceived as a single and unified entity, achieved by strong geometry for the plan and brick as a dominant building material. Khan had made very strong statement using brick in his first important building, the Richards Medical Research Laboratory in Philadelphia, USA. But there is a phenomenally great difference between the bricks of the 2 places. Bricks in Ahmedabad are not good. They are sandy and porous, absorbing unacceptable level of water. Most of the structures are built with load-bearing walls and mild steel reinforcement to take care of larger spans. Rusting of steel over a period of time caused cracks in the walls and spalling at many places. You can see before and after. Also, the east facade of the administrative building, before restoration and after restoration. Enormous degeneration due to rusting of steel. You know, it's a typical problem, and it's a problem which is across the world. Now, reading hall before restoration and the reading hall after restoration. Third floor stack area before restoration, third floor after restoration, which is a silent zone. Now, the second institute that I would like to discuss is the National Institute of Design. Architects Gautam Sarabhai and Gira Sarabhai, not qualified architects, but very committed and did extensive work in researching about materials. Year of construction is 1964 to 1969. Founders, Government of India and industrialists of Ahmedabad, supported by Ford Foundation. Program advisors were Charles Eames and Ray Eames. Conservation architect, I have worked on this building, particularly after the earthquake, for a lot of restoration and retrofitting. Structural consultant for retrofitting were SERC Madras, which is now Chennai. The photographs are courtesy of NID. Next. The institute's campus is located on the banks of Sabarmati River, which would get flooded every few years. This demanded certain responses from the buildings along the river, other buildings also which are along the river. Local regulations made it obligatory to raise buildings on stilts with no important functions on ground floor. Almost all the activities are in the upper two floors. So these are two shots flooded in the campus. Next. The earthquake of 2001 caused heavy damages to the buildings, particularly due to hollow plinth and heavy structure. Immediate action was needed as the maximum damage was caused at junction of columns and beams. Major spalling of concrete could result in collapse of the structures. The floor had started sinking and had settled by 10 millimeter in 12 hours. All such spots were provided with additional support, temporary supports were provided. And there was also a discussion to demolish some of the buildings. But my view was that we can save them. And as a matter of fact, we succeeded in saving all the buildings. No, these are temporary arrangements during earthquake because nobody wanted to live inside the buildings. Now, this is the kind of damage that happened. You can, in the upper picture, along with the drawing, which was followed for retrofitting, how the columns were damaged. At the top picture shows the connection with the floor, and the bottom picture shows connection with the beams and the first floor slab. And the drawings show how structural retrofitting was done. Now, the third is the School of Architecture, which is now part of CEP University. Architect B.V. Doshi, year of construction 1966 to 1968. Founders were Ahmedabad Education Society with B.V. Doshi, Bernard Kahn, and R.N. Vakil as the promoters. Conservation consultant, CEPT is working on its own with its own faculty. And the photographs here are by Dinesh Mehta. The design philosophy expected a very open, well-lit and transparent building. Cross ventilation to take care of climatic needs. Thick load-bearing brick walls carry ribbed concrete floors, just basic construction. Light is very important factor in design. So you can see these pictures, how light was brought in. The lower floor is extensively used, casually as well as for organized events. Thank you. So these premier institutes of Ahmedabad have played a major role in developing thinking in management, in design, and in architecture across the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, professors. It was an amazing lecture on modern architecture. Very interesting and amazing buildings that I know very well, that, as you said, they need some conservation activities, no? Especially the the ones by Le Corbusier that are not in very good condition. I don't know if someone has a question for you. If not, I just want to highlight a fact. I see that these masters that came to India had a very good, very strong impact on the local way of doing architecture. But do you think that these masters were also contaminated by the Indian culture? For example, Le Corbusier said that when he worked in Brazil, he was contaminated with the very the round shapes of the organic architecture, the Brazilian organic architecture. Do you think that in India something like that affected the work of this master when they came back to Europe, for example, or US, or not?
This question to me.
I don't know.
Okay, well, you know, there are two points on that. I don't think they were very much impacted by the Indian culture or Indian way of life. And I don't think they tried to go deep into it. Okay. But they were very much impacted by the climate of this country, because it was extremely difficult for them to think that a place can be so hot. At 45, 46 degrees in summer, centigrade is not easy. And so their buildings, whether Corbusier's buildings in Chandigarh or Corbusier's building in Ahmedabad or Corbusier or Khan's campus in Ahmedabad, there is a very strong sense of protection, a strong sense of protecting the openings against the sun. And as a matter of fact, the Millowners Association building, a lot of work was done by calculating sun angles, and the protection is sought from northwest. You know, the sunbreakers, or brise soleil as they call, is protecting from the northwest sun, which is very strong. Now, there is an interesting factor to this, that the facade turned out to be so interesting with these sunbreakers or brise soleil, that Corbusier used it in Boston, in Cambridge, Harvard campus, when he designed this art center. And exactly the same kind of facade with additional elements. And it can be minus 30 degrees, you know, plus 45 degrees centigrade, and, you know, but he used it irrespective of the climate, because he was fascinated by the elements. So there can be this kind of things happening, but climate, yes, they interpreted very carefully. And but culture, you know, is they not. Corbusier made a lot of sketches of cows and bulls and people and bullock carts, and, you know, a lot of sketches. He was very fascinated, and he used some of the sketches as kind of relief in concrete walls. But otherwise,
okay. Thank you very much for your answer, and again for the beautiful presentation you both delivered today. I'm very glad that you accepted the invitation. Now I think we can go ahead with the other speakers. Oops, sorry, can you see the screen? I think. Okay. So the next speakers are Michele Canatà and Fatima Fernandes. They are from Portugal. They are architects, very good professionals, and at the same time teachers at the ESAP, Escola Superiore Artistica do Porto. They are working together since 1984. And their work and projects have been presented in several group exhibitions at the Biennale of Venice, at the Triennale in Milan in 96 and in 97. So welcome again, and stage is yours if you want to share your screen and start the presentation. I ask all the speakers to stay in 15 minutes, more or less presentation, to also leave some space for the debate in case of any questions. Thank you.
Okay, are you
perfect? Yeah.
Okay, so I want to we are very grateful to be here and to discuss with you a work that we have done since 20 years. So we work in that territory with a very strong architecture. And this is one of the place more interior in Portugal, in the border with Spain and Portugal, in the north of the country. And those interventions were built by 3 young architects. They were finishing her studies, and they were the first projects that they done in 1953. And between that year and they concluded that 3 big projects in 1964. So we present you that architecture that is more, we think, a landscape architecture than by the industrial infrastructures. And they build all the little cities were built to serve the industrial infrastructures, the dams, now 3 dams. And this is one of the place to understand the character of the territory, very, very strong territory with not a lot of urbanization, without big interventions in terms of the urban spaces. I think that in that territory, in that period, there was nothing in terms of the new and the quality of comfortable spaces built by the men. And though that is the plan of one of the little cities, a new town, and it's very important to understand that the architects, the 3 architects, João Archer de Carvalho, Nunes de Almeida e Rogério Ramos, they participated with the engineers and the economists in the decisions of all the transformation of the territory. And this is very modern now. They apply that idea that in the world, the modern want to build, to become one decision to transform, to build the space to habitate. And they here had that intuition now that new reality could be a way to applicate that principles that they studied in school, and they had that possibility as young architects to implementation in the territory, in the landscape, and in the houses of the people. And this is one of the first images that we want to present you, that transformation from one territory where there is nothing done by men, and the capacity to the architecture to transform big infrastructures in quality spaces. and that big dimension and the new builds who serve the industry, and all the character of the builds, that capacity to introduce in one territory where the technology was nothing, no, where all the culture was very poor in terms of the technology and the knowledge to build. No, they were able to build spaces very qualified, very new, and very incredible in terms of all the materials, the light, and the transparency, no, and the dimension of the space, and the space where the industry will be implemented. All the detail were drawn by that engineer, by that architects. All the elements, big elements and the little elements, were drawn by, and we in that years studied that material. We done a big, because we think that the modern first became important to maintain, is important to the pupil understand the importance of that material. Now it's important to form the population to the character and the importance that material has in our culture, in our transformation. Não? Não consigo, não tem rato. Não tem, Miguel. Senão temos que... Não consegue. Não chega. So that territory is very interesting in terms of the big infrastructure and the spaces where the people lived all the day. No, little cities. That cities were built in the same period that Brasilia and the Chandigarh was projected by that big architects. That is very little, but is very important for the Portuguese architecture and for the new young students who were formed in the School of Porto. So that is the chapel, no, and the simplicity of the structure, the material of that concrete in the pavement, no, and the simplicity of the elements. So, and in the time, in that period, that territory was abandoned, was completely abandoned for 50 years. And we know that because the industry don't need people in this moment, that type of the production, the electrification is produced in different places. There are no needs to be people here in that cities, and they were abandoned for a lot of time. And we begin with the properties, the big property owner of the dams, a process to rehabilitation, to recuperate that important patrimony, with a lot of difficulties, because they have a lot of money, but they are not, this is not her work, no? And this is the plan of the first intervention that we've done. The houses, the swimming pool, the space
tennis court,
tennis court, and one bee house who received the personnel who comes from the big cities in the center of Portugal to stay here for more long periods now, and all the gardens, because in that city, or in that little cities, the gardens were very important for the projects. Now, the houses, the builds, the structures were connected with the mountains by the gardens. No, sometimes the gardens were completely lost in the mountains. No, and that project from the landscape is also very important. That is the first build that we intervened. Was completely destroyed because and with a lot of transformations done in the years now, and we begin the intervention. This is concluded, and is important to refer now the importance of the investigation in the archives of the EDP, the enterprise of the production of electricity in Portugal, because that project, this is also a very important thing from the modern. We have the projects now, so we could investigate the original project and to understand the idea, the thought of the architects now, because that is very important sometimes to repropose some questions that we couldn't find anymore. No? And the drawings from that three architects are amazing, incredible. All the big territory and the details are incredible. Now, this was the situation that we find in that build, completely destroyed in terms, because the architecture when hasn't life in the interior become a ruin in a few years now. And here is also very important the furniture, because all was drawn by the architects. Portugal in that years hasn't design in terms of the furniture or also all the elements for the architecture. We were very poor in industrialization, and they draw all the elements that they after put in her architecture, but they were completely destroyed and this is the conclusion of the project. The project was the work was done with we think with a very careful attention to the colors, to the original materials, and we take away, is important to understand what the architects thought when they produced that now, and studied her drawings, and because sometimes we haven't writings, that architects don't write nothing, no, they all the time drawing. So those are the photos from the build finished. We changed all the infrastructures because the infrastructures were completely destroyed, completely obsolete, no? And we proposed to the client to recuperate all the furniture, and they agree with us, and we propose all the materials with the original colors and the original materials, no? And this is those are some views. The color photos are from the concluded project, and the white and black were the original photos, no? And with that possibility to live with those magnificent spaces and to put new life in that incredible builds. No, the bedrooms, because were very difficult, because all had drawn with a measure now, and that measure is completely present in all the build now. We couldn't make nothing in the interior of the structure who passed that line. That line is and also the collocation of an elevator, because they asked us that need to be used for all people, and that difficulty to introduce in one build that we didn't projected a new element, no? But also the importance, because we believe that builds, if they don't be used, they go away in a few months, no? And those are the gardens, because also the gardens have drawings. They used different specialists to project that big landscape, and we tried to understand the new vegetal elements that they implement in that territory, and the presence of the elements in, and that is a new element to put the machineries, because the machineries weren't anymore possible to be able now. And in this moment, we are recuperating that houses. Those are the photos from the original photos. It's very interesting, because here the vegetation is very little now, and in this moment they are completely destroyed. They cut all the trees, and but the territory is very strong, and we think that the territory has the capability to repropose a new recuperation now, and the builds are in that situation in this moment. We had finished the project, and in this moment we are prepared to begin the recuperation, no? And this is the situation in that conditions, though, and we passed the same process to study the build, to understand how the landscape could be maintained, how that little elements, because they put some stones now with a lot of care, and sometimes the stone is not anymore there now, and the doors are not here anymore, because they I don't know, they were como é que se diz, roubadas, stolen. So this is a big destruction, no? At some time is necessary to maintain, to understand how we could maintain that destruction, no? To repropose, to rebuild old elements. And it's here we have also a problem, because now we have a lot of rules, and our engineers put us some rules to recuperate the builds, the old builds. Now we are all the time in a fight with them, because we said we tell them that those are so important spaces, so important material, that we couldn't apply here the rules that we used to do to control things not so qualified now, but at some time is a very big fight with them. But in all the time we could do what you want. Now we have that strong, but it's very difficult, we know, but we need to discuss, to impose the importance of the architecture and the importance of the culture to maintain, because they are more qualified that architecture that sometimes we do with a lot of rules now. And this is the situation now. The other build was like that in the same conditions, and now is important to repropose. The furniture is completely destroyed now, but we have some elements. Now we could rebuild that elements, and we have the project, the original project, and we could study that and repropose the maintenance of all the windows, of all the doors, because that drawings are very, very perfect. They are all now, and this is the cover of the pavement in the garden. They are we have all, and we have also that element that is very beautiful. It's not beautiful, it's very useful, because here we have all the materials that they use, the colors, the elements. So is a very difficult process, but is amazing. At the same time, we need to fight to maintain that heritage, because culture in our culture, those builds and that big landscape represent the transformation of Portugal in terms of the industrialization and the quality of the life in the houses, in the work, and so we finished, and we hope that our experience becomes some useful for you, and because you the projects that you present us are amazing, no? But sometimes that little interventions that are in some countries are very, very important to give to the modern a dimension and an importance that we are sure that that period has had in our life in our countries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michele and Fatima. It was very interesting. I think an outstanding work on that area. Also, if I'm not wrong, awarded with the second place at the Domus Award after that Tadawando. So I'm yeah, I think you put on the table two very interesting aspects. On one hand, the importance to restore also the furnitures that were designed for these places, that in my opinion are really part of this cultural heritage, the 20th century cultural heritage. And on the other hand, the importance to study, to try to be in the mind of the designer in order to restore properly the building. So not only the importance of the current documentation with different technologies, but also the importance of documenting the design process of the architect, design thought. And I think this is part of the idea of this network, also to understand. We will see it, I think, in the next presentation by the colleague Florio and Tagliari, to understand called design concept of these architects, behind these architects. Thank you very much. I think I can introduce the next speaker, who is Felipe Corres Melachos. Let me share the slide. So Felipe is a double PhD in architecture and urbanism from the Mackenzie Presbyterian University and University of Ferrara. Actually, I had the chance to share with him 1 year along his PhD path. He developed a very interesting PhD dissertation on the parametric analysis of Gaussian walls by Eladio Dieste. By the way, the work was awarded honorable mention between all the PhD theses in Brazil. So congratulations again to Felipe, who is also an architect, a professional in São Paulo, expert in residential, commercial, and hotel projects. He's professor at the Escola da Cidade University and Anhembi Morumbi University. So Felipe, stage is yours, 15 minutes, please.
All right, Luca, thank you very much. Oh, first of all, I would like to say that I'm very proud to be an academic son of Luca and Federica, and also Professor Florio. And also that honorable mention is a testament of your capacity and Federica's capacity as students. And I was really glad to receive that. So thank you very much, and congratulations to you as well. So thank you. So let's get going. So I'm gonna try to be quick over here. I'm gonna talk real quickly about the structural artists of Latin America. So I think that you guys already presented me, so I'm gonna skip this real quick. And so what I'm gonna be talking about right here, I'm going to be talking about the structural artists, which is a term that was coined by David Billington to term the leaders in the field of structural engineering, which are those special people who build with economy, elegance, and efficiency, thus creating works of art. And then we're talking about people such as Eiffel, such as Fresinet, but there are a few people who touch my heart, you know, and one of them are like Robert Maillard, and with such incredible bridges. I mean, can you guys believe that this thing was built in 1930? They actually made Maillard bridges be kept, be reinforced because people were scared of crossing them. So actually Gideon in Space, Time and Architecture was the first author in my bibliographical review. I don't know if you guys know anyone else who actually compared engineering and architecture works as works of art to the work of Maillard. So I think he might be the most preeminent, most prolific architectural artist of all time, and that's in Billington's work. So what are we talking about when we say structural artists? We're talking about people who built at a lower cost, that were concerned about their design appearance, that were responsible for their own companies, and that were technically at their forefront. So usually were people that were concentrated in a specific material, you know, trying new applications, developing new design and construction methods. And especially, this is a very specific thing where design and construction are intertwined. And that's where things starts to get interesting, because here in Escola da Cidade, which since we are in a network, I mean, it would be a pleasure to invite you to, when this crazy pandemic is over, to get to know Escola da Cidade, which is a therapeutical place to teach here in this crazy mayhem, which is São Paulo, with almost 20 million people. but it's a lovely place to teach. And we have this graduate course which is called Conceive and to Build, which is based on the street structural intuitions of Roland Mainstone, which are the intuitions of structural behavior, which tend to the spatial awareness of stability and are basically based on geometry of the structures. We have the intuitions of structural action, and this basically tends to the mathematical analysis of structure. And we have the intuition of structural adequacy, which is based on experience and practice, which in some countries, in some places, is something that, and especially in this pandemic, is something that the architects are losing. I mean, here in Escola da Cidade, we are fortunate to have a workshop near São Paulo's biggest avenue, which is called the Minhocão. Maybe Fatima will understand that. It means big wormhole in Portuguese. It's a crazy avenue. It's a urbanistic disaster, but it's awesome to be working in there. It's pretty awesome to be building stuff in there with the students. And that's one of the reasons that we're studying this. And in there, we kind of try to get hands-on and make students testing to get a mix of all those intuitions and to develop things in a rather empirical way, to get to calculations, to make them test the calculations, to get models every bigger in a one-to-one scale, and to test materials. Right now in Brazil, we're fortunate enough to get the bamboo, a normative from bamboo. So we're really excited on that. So hopefully when this pandemic is over, I heard Fatima talking about how is the pandemic here. Well, we're getting vaxxed. I'm happily double vaxxed. So I don't know. Hopefully this thing will be over soon and we will be able to get back in here. So, and another thing that really drove me to look for this was the thesis that Luca mentioned, that really Luca and Fede along Florida really helped me a lot to get this thing done, which was a mathematical and computational analysis of Hilario Dieste's Gaussian vaults, which are these crazy structures which did not have a mathematical and geometrical definition. And it's so that's one of the big whys of this research. Are there structural artists in Latin America? Because David Billington only mentions European artists. And in my thesis, I actually, and now I think I'm wrong in my thesis because I say that it's rather a Eurocentric thing, you know, but it's not an Eurocentric thing. It's rather that it's a knowledge that hasn't reached the Western world. And I grew up in the States, and it was kind of weird because Brazil, it's not Western to the States. It's not Western to Europe. Brazil is a planet by itself, just as India is a planet by itself. So we're kind of isolated hemispheres, universes in a whole world, you know, and we might have the power to give back and transform this, the whole, you know, the modern movement more than we think. So these Gaussian vaults, they have a really complex geometry, and it was really fun to do this experimental thesis and trying to rebuild it in ever bigger scales and try to computationally understand their geometry and so on and so forth, and actually understand the actors that were in there. And that's not a matter of ostracism or academic Eurocentrism. So, but it's a knowledge that is not yet Westernized. That's my actual stance as of now, because I was reading a lot, and in Frampton and Benevolo and everything. And I was not reading, I was not seeing Latin America. This is the Treaty of Tordesillas. Once again, my Portuguese friends are gonna recognize this. And Brazil, the thing with Brazil is this: we look this way, we look to Africa, we look to Europe, we look to the States, but we do not look inside. And here in Escola da Cidade, we have the opportunity to have the traveling school, and we take students to Paraguay, we take students to Colombia, we take students to Uruguay. So we're kind of an alternative school here in Brazil. We actually take this way back, you know, and so that's why it's kind of therapeutical to teach here. And it's also interesting. I had the opportunity to give lessons in Peru the beginning of this semester, and it was awesome because I had no idea what was the modern architecture in Peru like. So it was like so that was the main question. Are there structural artists in Latin America? I'm finding out right now because I found out that there was something in Uruguay. I mean, just so you guys know, here in Brazil, they do not even on the news. They don't bring any news from Uruguay. They bring news from Argentina, a little bit from Chile, and anything and nothing else. They don't care. So it's only from Europe, and that's it, and America, and that's it. So, but and there's this is the church from Cristo Burrow, which I really study on in my doctorate, and it's important to notice that this church has really lots of rolled surfaces, lots of important geometry right here. It's really important to know that we and Luca in the Department of Ferrara and Floro, we wrote a paper and where we actually argued that this was a work that made alongside with the Deposito Portuario of Valero Dieste of Montevideo Dieste be considered a structural artist. So it was the beginning of this train of thought. I think Luca might remember in Paesaggio Urbano. And recently, this church was what made Eladio Dieste's work to be considered modern heritage by UNESCO. So I think this year is a big year for Latin America modern heritage. And so I'm really happy. It's located in Atlantida. It's about an hour or so from Montevideo. If you guys can, go, but it only opens once a month. So make sure you book it with the priest because it's a hard priest to get by. So, and it's one of those things that I've been learning as of now. It's a church from an Italian, an architect from Italian origin. So I think you guys gonna like it. I don't know if you guys know it, Luca and Fede, Enrique Cigliani. So there's lots of Europeans and architects of Italian descent working here in Latin America. And this guy, he built awesome, structurally amazing architecture here in Latin America. And also, I think one of the most underrated figures here in Latin America is this guy right here, João Figueiras Lima. I mean, Oscar Niemeyer got a Pritzker, Paulo Mendes da Rocha got a Pritzker, but I think that this guy really, he should get a Pritzker, because when we talk about structural artists in Latin America, and I think that our folks, the professors James, Mr. and Mrs. James, they really talked about the weather. And João Figueiras Lima, whose nickname is Lelé, which means crazy in Brazil, I think his main contribution to modern architecture here in Brazil was his adequation to the weather, because Brazil has many Brazils within, just like India. If here it snows, here we have rainforests, we have places where it snows, we have beach, we have mountains, we have lots of peoples, well, and places and geographies. So I think when it comes to conservation and heritage, and when it comes to my main interest, which is structural design and geometries, which make structural design feasible, climate plays a big role. So this is a guy which in Escola Cidade, we're making an exhibition, and it would be really nice to actually make it and show it to you guys in the Inside Network after it's done. We can actually send the pictures to Luca after it's done. It would be nice to put it in the website later on. I think it would be a good contribution to the network. And so I think that what makes a good structural artist in Latin America would be, besides those criteria from Billington, the geographical, climatical, technical, and social adaptation and expertise, because you gotta build with what the local people know how to build, and you gotta build with techniques that will last in a weather which sometimes is harsh. So I think that's the most important. And when second half of the 20th century, which is when those rationalist tendencies in Latin America were adapting. And I think how it's mostly a matter of bibliographical review and in-situ visitation when the pandemic gives us a break, and IDs those and identification of those personas that managed to build in such a new way, and the obtention of those original drawings just so they can be redrawn, remodeled, and rebuilt in an experimental fashion with the students and constructed in a workshop in the construction site. I think that's really important in this pandemic, take the students back to the construction site. I think that it's urgent for all of us teachers to take it back and to test how those geometries can be technically innovated and adapt to their environments. And my tool of choice is parametric modeling. So I made a joke for you guys. I parametrically model my face over here, just so you guys can see. It's a script from Grasshopper. It's the same tool that I use in my PhD. So, and if you guys would like to talk to me, here's my email. And I would really like to say thank you once again for Federica, Luca, and Florio for all the support that they have been giving me through the thesis and beyond. I think this pandemic has been really harsh on all of us, and I bid you all really good health. And thank you, Luca, Fede, and Florio, for all the support. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Felipe. It's very interesting. Actually, congratulations again for the honorable mention. And I think you really deserve that award because you are very good in modeling, and your analysis on the Latte d'Este work along the PhD dissertation was very good. I think you touched the right issue, the relation between climate, building, and environment. I think in the South American architecture, this is very, very crucial. So I think also this point of view of remodeling these architectures and try to understand the design process also of unbuilt architecture is another way, probably more technological, okay, than others way, but in a way to explore this the modern cultural heritage and to transfer this heritage to this legacy to the young generations, which are very attracted by these new technologies. So unfortunately, when you speak about cultural heritage, if you don't put some technologies in the mix, in the recipe, young people are quite, I mean, they avoid to go deeper into the subject. Technologies, softwares could be a way to involve young people. So thank you again for your presentation. I think I can introduce the next speaker. Then if there are questions, we can go ahead at the end of the session. Next speaker is Alessandro Luigini from the Free University of Boden, presenting his studies on Oscar Niemeyer's work. So an Italian point of view on the Niemeyer's design process, the evolution, the development of the Niemeyer's design process. So Alessandro is associate professor in Brixen in the Faculty of Education. He received the prestigious nomination to the Mies van der Rohe Award in 2013. And he's a member of scientific committees, scientific journals. I like to highlight the coordination of the conferences, the series of conferences, IMG and Earth. So Alessandro, if you want, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you for the presentation and for the invitation. I like the last thing that you tell about the needs of introduce young people to heritage, and is one of my goals in my research to put some young people, really young people, also in primary and pre-primary age on heritage, and I am happy that you underline this value of our work. So I share the desktop. Can you confirm that you can see? Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. So the contribution that I present now tells in brief the work published in 2018 in a monograph book about design and architectural theory and criticism about a point of view on the Oscar Niemeyer's work. In this book, I have finalized the work carried out on the basis of the digital representation exercises of my students in the Faculty of Architecture in Pescara, and developed through the elaboration of a methodology of evolutionary morphological analysis. So is in the methodological point of view that the value of my work can be identified. The biological analogy has been used many times in architecture, both by architects and scholars. And there are two great scientists who have provided a model for the study of evolution, Darwin and Thompson. Darwin with the origin of the species in the half of 19th century, and Thompson with the on growth and form at the beginning of 20th century. Darwin focused on species, while Thompson focused on individual organisms. While in Darwin, the core of the theory is the relationship between a before and an after. In Thompson, the core of the theory is the understanding of the mechanisms, for him, of mechanical origin that explain how and why an organism develops in the biological field. In the first decades of 20th century, many architects used a biological analogy, such as Le Corbusier, Gropius, Bedi Expressionist, and others. For example, Le Corbusier, however, did not use the biological analogy as a morphological references, but to explain the functioning of machine. For driving and living for him as the same, as a metaphor of the human body, in search of the standards on which he would elaborate 20 years after the modular. For him, the body is a perfect machine. He wrote, we must aim for standardization to address the problem of perfection. The Pantheon is a product of selection applied to a standard. Architecture acts on standards. Standards are the matter of logic, analysis, scrupulous study. They are established on the basis of a well-defined problem. Experimentation definitely sets the standard. And so on, only for example. In the development of my research, I integrated 4 models of evolutionary analysis from 4 fundamental studies. First one, known in chronological mode, is the book from Austrian-American architect Christoph Alexander. It wrote in the 60s, a book destined to go down in the history of design and architectural theory, entitled Notes on Synthesis of Form. The thesis proposed is that it is possible to apply a rational, almost algorithmic design method to replace the designer's personal intuition. The epistemological framework of its research is essentially of biological nature, and drew its fundamentals from the mathematics of classification and structural relationship. Alexander applied its method of analysis of the structure of an ancient village, and the illustration make it clear how the proposed reading leads to the decomposition of primary elements whose relationships are essentially analogic. In this section of the research, Alexander distinguished 2 design processes. First one is spontaneous or unself-conscious, and the second one is non-spontaneous or self-conscious. The former is practiced by communities of peoples who, through successive generation, refine ways of construction, building, or artifacts over a long period of times. While the latter is the strict preserve of specialists, architects, and designers who produce design by trade. For Alexander, the spontaneous processes are more positive and more enduring in time. She wrote, primitive forms are goods as a result of a gradual adaptation process. Over many centuries, these forms were gradually adapted to their culture by a series of intermittent through persistent correction. This book makes him maybe the starter of the myth of architectural Darwinism. Second one, the writer Samuel Balter has had a bit of influence as a promoter of evolutionary vision that has found a fair reputation outside scientific circle. Balter proposed a model that has some resonance outside the scientific circuit, in which he proposed an analogy between the dimensional evolution in the animal world and the dimensional variation of technical object. He wrote, first of all, we would observe that as some of the lowest invertebrates reached a much larger size than in their more highly organized living representative, a decrease in the size of the machine often followed their development and progress. The English archaeologist Henry Balfour published a beautiful study that was destined to be so successful that it is still often cited today by those working on the evolution of technological artifacts. His theory consists in 3 stages. First one is adaptation. In the past, natural elements were adapted as decoration. For example, the grain of wood, the grain of the stone, the knots in a bamboo cane, and so on. The second stage is the imitation. Decoration initially imitated elements adapted from nature. And third one, the most important for us, is non-intentional variation. The variation that takes place by making a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and so on. Here we can see one of Balter's experiments in which he asked 11 illustrators to copy the drawing in figure 1, but using as reference the copy made by the previous illustrator, okay? We can see how many features of the drawings change radically. And Patroclus' bare chest become an informal dress from copies 8 and 9. In this experiment, we start with the snails climbing over a twig, which, as we see in figure 14, becomes a strange beard. This process followed the reverse processes of philology. Okay. Last but not least, Kieseler's book on Kieseler paper on Correalism and Biotechnique is more important. But Kieseler's writing is not very scientific, but his methodology is really interesting. Among other things, he proposed the concept of the technological environment as an ecological vision of our acting in the world through technical artifacts. She wrote, every artifact, be it a tool, an aesthetic artifact or an architecture and so on, goes through a specific evolutionary process that can be broken down into different stages. This diagram is quite complex, but we don't have time to go through it all. However, it is important to underline that it provides an important reference for my research. If we look at bottom right, we see the standard knife, which meets the needs of cutting, the hypothetic idea of cutting. The standard type is variated to cut different things, from butter to meat, bread or fruit. The repetition of a variation leads to an advance in knowledge, and therefore to a new standard type. And now we try to, let's see if it works also with Niemeyer's architecture. In this work, I identified 6 graphemes which made up the plastic language of Niemeyer's entire work from the beginning to end. As Niemeyer himself says, with Pampouillet's work, the plastic vocabulary of my architecture, unexpected interplay or straight lines and curves, begin to define itself. Each of these graphemes are as adapted following process that can easily be interpreted as imitation or later variation of the same standard type, to a phase of simplification in the last years of his long life. The first grapheme concerned modernist building, those that seem to be inspired by the most widespread models of a modern monument. The standard type will, at some point, see a stable variation, becoming a new standard type in the curvature of the generating plane. From the Conjunto Copan in São Paulo, onward, Meyer's modernist buildings will be mainly curvilinear in plan. How we see two explains of the digital models that my first year students made between 2010 and 2012. On the left is the Communist Party headquarters in Paris, and on the right, the Intbau Residential building in Ansa-Viertel in Berlin. The second grapheme is building phytomorphic building and elements. Starting with the dense house in Pampuya, the winding nature of waves and mountains will be a constant feature in all Niemeyer's work. On the left, some rendering of the Casas das Canoas, while on the right, the vertical building in Belo Horizonte, where there is a hybridization with the modernist grapheme. The wonderful roofs of many of Niemeyer's projects can be traced back to a section line, a generator, developed three-dimensionally according to a directrix, configuring translation surfaces. These surfaces, however, are very often varied with respect to a canonical projective configuration. On the left is Francis Church in Pampuya, and right is the Serpentine Gallery in London. This is a grapheme that was not present in Pampuya, and it represents a standard type that marks Niemeyer works. From the government building in Brasilia to the masterpiece of Mondadori's headquarters in Italy, the dream of expelling the load-bearing structure outside to suspend a glass case is constantly pursued by Niemeyer. On the left, we see the Palacio d'Alvorada, and on the right, the Mondadori headquarters. Another way Niemeyer used to generate roofs can be traced back to the descriptive model of the revolution surfaces. Here, the section line is developed circularly instead to being translated. On the left, we see a volumetric reconstruction of the Brasilia airport, and on the left, the cathedral built in Brasilia. The last grapheme concerns Niemeyer's continuous research since the 50s, when he began to imagine the reduction of the ground contact of buildings. From the unbuilt modern art in Caracas on the right to MAC Niterói in the left in this slide, to project in the early 2000s, buildings with central support will be one of Niemeyer's recurring models. And this is all. Thank you for hearing, and I'm available by mail for advice or clarification.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. It was very interesting, a very different point of view, but I think this is the meaning of our network, to have contributions from different fields with the common topics, on the common topics of modern heritage. Very, very nice analysis carried out by the evaluation of the graphemes, the identification of the types, that Oscar Niemeyer developed in hundreds of buildings all along his career. Must be a very long research path for you, and the book is very interesting indeed. Congratulations again for your presentation. If we do not have questions, I think we can go ahead with the next presenter, which is Chaitra Sharad. Thanks for being here with us, Chaitra. Chaitra, sorry, okay. Chaitra is a professor at the IES College of Architecture in Mumbai, in India. She's an architect, and she was part of the team assigned the process of creating a nomination dossier for the UNESCO World Heritage Foundation. His research is very related to the role of the human element in architecture. So I think she's gonna present her point of view with this title, Learning Modernism Through Parallel Narratives, India and the World. Thanks, Chaitra, if you want to start.
Yes, thank you, Luca. I'm just going to share my screen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, is the slideshow visible?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm going to stick to a script so that I don't go beyond time. Okay, bear with me, please. So today I'm going to be presenting my ongoing research on the idea of many modernisms and parallel developments in modernism centered around Asia at large and India in particular, parallelly to the rest of the world. I'm basing the study on the broad premise that modernism was not a stylistic development, but an evolution of design sensibilities. In the conventional history that we learn of modern design, which was basically the diffusionist model that Nicolas Pevsner put forth in his Pioneers of Modern Movement, suggests that modernism began in the Western Europe and then diffuses outward into the rest of the world. This is a widely accepted take on history of modern movement. The other, more inclusive approaches provide a consideration that these developments are more simultaneous and widespread than we make them out to be. These approaches provide room for local and national identities to be taken into consideration while also discussing the commonalities. Let's look at the evolution of modernism the way we know it today. The beginning of modern thought is usually attributed to the industrialization, mass production, newer material, and steady development and technology. Modern design thought is at a nascent stage here. Between the wars, there is a sense of cynicism towards establishment and a revolutionary sense of design. Mass production at a large scale and scientific temperament lead to a function-first design idea. The functionalist ideas start to gain a stronger voice and lead to the eventual consolidation of modern movement into German Werkbund, Siam, Bauhaus, and other such. Post-war begins a shift in thought. Avant-garde movements, mass rehabilitation, and eventual divergence in the modern movement. As a result, Siam is dissolved. Beyond the 1950s, we see a maturity in modernist theories and a search for balanced and sustainable development. Simultaneously, in the non-Western world, especially in Asia, most nations were colonized by the European countries and some by their neighbor, Japan. This saw a massive construction in colonial style directly brought from what was prevalent in Europe. Here we see the Calcutta High Court, and simultaneously we see what Japan was doing in Taiwan, where it had occupied. And they were also copying what was probably prevalent at the time in Europe. In the 19th and 20th century, local elements and symbolism seemed to be added in the colonial construction. One could see a plethora of decorative elements from Rajput and Mughal architectures in India. That's one example for it, Victoria Memorial. And similarly, again, Japan tried to do something in Korea. In the later half of 20th century, when most nations had gained independence from colonial rule, nation building and infrastructural developments brought about a question of nationalism and regional representation of architecture, and eventually of what truly is modern. Historian Robert Finley argues that standardization and mass production were important to the success of porcelain city of Jingdezheng in China. By the beginning of 18th century, Jingdezheng had already started to resemble industrial town with exports all across the world, many royal and private kilns, and hundreds of ships lining up its ports. Similarly, sophisticated processes and mass production were important to the success of Indian textiles across the world. The process of spinning, weaving, dyeing, printing were highly specialized skill and knowledge. Art and related studies describe the Indian textile and Chinese porcelain exports and the quantities they were produced in as industrial movement as early as 18th century. Simultaneously, Raja Ravi Verma, a household name in India, was a very popular artist. His regular motifs were gods and goddesses worshipped in the country. He allowed for production and public use of his artworks by making available the lithographs. His lithographs can be seen as early modern endeavors in democratization of art. Theorist and art historian Geeta Kapoor then rightly asks, when exactly was modernism? Colonization, technology, and mechanization may have led to an eventual decline, but these developments proved that design played an important role in modernization. Vishwa Bharati, the school founded by Rabindranath Tagore, projected a search for universal modernism beyond the rigid confines of realism propagated by colonial academia. It was the time when Rabindranath Tagore was the most influential interlocutor between India and Europe after winning the Nobel Prize for Literature. Kala Bhavan at Vishwa Bharati was established in the year 1919, did not only start along the same time as Bauhaus, but had a similar pedagogical approach of lessening the gap between the artist and the craftsman. Both the schools embodied the values of universal modernism and functioned as the meeting point for cosmopolitan avant-gardes. Both Bauhaus and Shantiniketan taught design development, production, and sustainability under one roof. In 1922, artist-educator Nandalal Bose became the director of Kala Bhavan, the art and design school he developed. He developed a unique pedagogical underpinning at the school and as against the stereotypical Indian style that was borrowed from the Western didactic system. In the same year, Stella Kremrisch, along with Indian Society of Oriental Art, organized an exhibition, Bauhaus in Calcutta, which exhibits masters' and students' work produced at the Bauhaus. Initial glimpses of contextuality and modernism evolved through the decisions that Nandalal took. By the 1920s, Kala Bhavan had more or less started to resemble the Bauhaus. While Bauhaus began with a planned program, Kala Bhavan developed over a period of time under the guidance of Rabindranath Tagore. Tagore's direction and Nandalal's vision finally shaped the teachings at which versatility and communicational efficacy as central ideas. Stylistic unity was considered incidental, reflecting the sensibility of idiosyncrasy and individual artist. In the inaugural speech at Bauhaus, Gropius exclaimed, "Building, design, Gothic, India." To him, architecture was the mother of all arts and greatest inspiration. Ultimate aim of all artistic activity was to build. Considering the foundational basis of Bauhaus being a strong collaboration of artists and craftsmen, the guilds that built the Gothic structure or the Indian temples were to him the greatest examples. Bauhaus masters' exchange of ideas on thoughts and spirituality with Asia, especially India and Japan, is quite an intensive study in itself. And the simultaneous development of ideas, therefore, can form a basis of whole new narrative of modern architecture history. Jules Schmidt, a student at Bauhaus and later a master, included the 7 energy chakras originally mentioned in the Upanishads into his lectures, apart from introducing meditation exercises to the students. He pointed out that a look at the social discrepancies of technological machine age should suffice to make all the splendor seem quite questionable. He was convinced that eventually the new age would have psychological and physiological wholeness of human being at its core. The chakras he presented in his classes were at the core of his belief and also were the embodiment of foundational utopian thoughts at Bauhaus. In 1956, at the inaugural of Ulm Design School, Gropius echoed Schmidt's words. He said that the technological advances of the past decades had dissolved people's sense of community and emphasized on the importance of new cultural orientation. He says that the Asian thinking is more magical and internalized in comparison to the logical, practical Western man. He called for a future that balances the spiritually divine and intellectually logical. The need for local discussions overwhelmingly superseded the pre-war functionalist methodology, as the human complexity of cities seemed incompatible with the rigidity of Charter d'Athens on urbanism. The Dune Manifesto talked of habitat as a part of community placed within a city and natural environment. It called for a contextual relevance of architectural intervention and eventual action towards humanization. End of World War II led to a widespread revolution. Populations across the world were questioning the established norms, and society never looked the same again. Puritanical ideas of science and technologies backed by logic that governed the early tenets of modernism were questioned by newer generation of architects. Meanwhile, decolonization was a major event that simultaneously left newly formed independent nations across Asia. In the Oterlo circles, Van Eyck represented the complex and changing human realities that needed to be dealt with in an equally complex dialectics of vernacular, classical, and traditional in order to form something truly contemporary. In the introduction to his exhibition in 1986, Charles Correa spoke about the unchanging man in varying contexts. He placed a large-scale replica of the Vastu Purusha at the center of the exhibition, signifying the man and his cosmos. Correa describes that the universal need for shelter is transcended by the set of overriding values of human condition, a concern for life, for community, for beauty. The human element thus became a major guiding factor for the future of modernism. While in Europe, it came with the end of Siam in the last meeting in 1959, in India and other Asian regions, it came in the form of large infrastructural changes and challenges in nation building exercises. Modernism, and more importantly, modern architecture, went through the much needed change. Post-war projects by the so-called thinking architects display a keen sense of regional perception, balance of tradition and wisdom of modern tenets, a keen attention to human comfort and scale, leading to an experiential and a user-centric design. Although very much influenced by Team 10 and ATBAT Africa's cluster mat building paradigm, this project of Gandhi Smarak Sangrahalaya by Charles Correa displays the quiet monumentality inseparable from village analog underlying the clusters. A similar balance of spatial sensibilities, human scale, and modernity is also observed at the National Institute of Design. Sangat expresses Doshi's desire for a connection between nature and the individual. The overall form exaggerates the details of nature with its rolling mounds, cave-like spaces, terraced land, playful water channels, and reflective surfaces. The architecture is an amalgam of natural elements, human scale, collaborative spaces, and sculptural forms. In this project, by Alvar Aalto, we observe an intimate spatiality, warmth in material palette, and a keen attention to detail. William Curtis, in his article, Contemporary Transformation of Modern Architecture, expresses the different turn the modern architecture movement has taken in different countries and suggests that the perception of modern architecture depends on regional polemics. For example, in the US, the debate is dominated by the Miesian skyscrapers, and in the process, layered spaces and architecture by the likes of Paul Rudolph has taken the flak. Curtis suggests that the narrative needs to go beyond mere formula and definition of modernism. He says that many nations have gone through their own processes of evolution and developed a modern language more relevant and therefore more unique to their region. To speak of inheriting and extending a tradition does not mean copying what has gone before, he says. Ideal would be to go beyond the mere chronology and set formulae. Absorbing the principles behind earlier solutions and transforming them into vocabularies suitable to the changed conditions, therefore imbibing the essence without mimicking the style. The critical map, therefore, must be concerned less with trends and chronologies and more with higher order of profound contribution. Now, with modern architecture starting to be recognized as heritage across the world, many modernist buildings are under threat of demolition or in severe need of conservation and renovation. The recent threat of demolition of a part of iconic Kala Academy was thwarted by public outcry and court intervention. On the other hand, the Hall of Nations at Pragati Maidan was demolished to make way for new development. It is a critical time to assimilate and analyze the uniqueness and spatial significance of these structures, and in the process find lesson applicable to the question of mindless development that troubles us today. In conclusion, the traditional Occidental historic views must be supplemented with a wider, more inclusive history. Modern movement has many principles across the nations based on their technological progress, spiritual inclination, and political predispositions. The Humanist Rebellion was an important direction that drew attention towards the need of architecture to be more democratic and community-centric in a world recovering from the trauma of war. The world was left with cultural vacuum, with corporations on one hand and the grim welfare state on the other. Today's architecture is deeply indebted to the interaction with the masters of modern architecture and their deep-set ideologies and thoughts, encouraging a wiser, more sustainable and considerate way forward. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Luca, for inviting us.
Thank you very much, Aidra, for your presentation. Very interesting, the relation between history, architecture, human-centered architecture. So I think also this aspect should be more studied, the relation between these masters, the impact that they had, but also the context. I mean, at the end, the humankind was building this architecture. So obviously there is a strong involvement with the mind, the culture, the context where these designers were acting. So thank you very much for your, and very interesting about the Indian Bauhaus influence. Very interesting.
Yeah, that was quite a revelation for me as well.
Yeah, I didn't know. Very interesting.
That's true.
Congratulations again.
Thank you so
Hi,
much.
Silvio. I see Silvio Oxman. Hi, Silvio. How are you? Another member of the NETET. He was teaching, I think. What?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
now?
yes. No, yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, I was teaching. I couldn't leave my students.
No worries.
So I was just listening to you, and I hope to talk to you on the next next time, okay?
Yes, sure.
Scusa Luca.
Yes, Michele. Yes.
Posso dire una cosa, Luca?
Certo.
No, è che noi purtroppo è sopraggiunto una cosa, dobbiamo andare in cantiere.
Ok, tranquillamente.
Chiediamo scusa non poter partecipare.
Capiamo, non c'è problema.
E poi speriamo la prossima di poter contribuire un po' meglio e stare fino alla fine.
Certo,
Comunque,
grazie ancora per i libri.
No, grazie per l'invito a questa, e speriamo che sia servito a qualcosa. Quello che
certo, assolutamente.
Ok, scusate, io purtroppo non... scusati tu per questa...
Non c'è problema, grazie ancora.
Saluti a tutti, ok?
Ciao Fatima. Today, Fatima and Michele.
Say most 10 minutes, and when...
Okay, they had to leave. So I'd like to thanks again Michele and Fatima, because they share their publication on our website, so you can download for free the books on their work. I think we can move on to the next presentation. And the next one, let me try to share this. Okay, is the unbuilt Villanova Artigas. The authors, Anna Tagliari and Vincent Florio, are colleagues from Brazil. Anna is a teacher, professor at the Unicamp University in Campinas, and she's the author of very interesting books, such as the Villanova Artigas Unbuilt Residential Projects with Rafael Perrone and Wilson Florio, and the Frank Lloyd Wright Principal Space and Forming Residential Architecture. she is currently part of the research group Architecture Project Representation and Analysis at the Mackenzie University. Wilson Florio is associate professor at Mackenzie University and adjunct professor at Unicampinas. His experience is between the area of contemporary architecture with emphasis on building design, the BIM approach, digital representation, and manufacturing systems. Unfortunately, today they're teaching as well, so they sent us a video, a 15 minutes video about the presentation. So now I'm going to share the video. Please let me know if it's working or not, because on Zoom when you share video, it's something tricky sometimes. So I try to send you the videos.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Natalia. I am an architect and professor at Unicamp. And Professor Wilson Florio is also an architect and professor at Mackenzie University and also Unicamp. We work together in researches. And I would like to thanks to Professor Luca Rossato for the invitation and congratulate for the organization of this meeting and this remarkable network. I've been working in researches involving analysis of architectural projects, in special modern architecture, since the beginning of the century. And today, I will talk about the architecture of João Batista Villanova Artigas, especially the unbuilt architecture, which was the main subject of my PhD research, and later on in another one with Professor Wilson Florio. Villanova Artigas was a very important architect in Brazil in the 20th century, especially in São Paulo. He is known as the master of the Paulista School of Architecture. His built architecture is very well known among students, professors, and architects in São Paulo, especially the FAUSP building. That's the building which houses the School of Architecture of the University of São Paulo. That's the building we are looking at in this slide. I organized this presentation in two parts. The first one is about my thesis, that I have analyzed a set of unbuilt houses designed by Artigas in the state of São Paulo. And the second one is the other research that I developed with Professor Wilson Florio, that we analyzed another group of unbuilt projects designed by Artigas all over the country. Let me start with the presentation of the first one, the first research. This research was developed in FAUSP between 2009 and 2012 with financial support of CNPq. The research was organized in steps and procedures that I will show in the sequence. The first step involved the research and survey in the archives of the FAUSP library to get the original drawings. This step was a very important part of the research because I could face with a great number of unbuilt projects designed by Artigas that I have never heard before. In this moment, I could select the object of the research that was in total 39 projects of unbuilt houses in the state of São Paulo. Here is the list. Some projects, I had two versions. So in total, I had 39 projects. The state of São Paulo and the city of São Paulo. The second step involved the visits to the buildings designed by Artigas to understand more deeply his architecture, the details, the proportion, and the solutions in general. The third step was the redrawing of each project as an important part of the analysis and understanding of the material, and also the creation of a digital model. This step was a little bit difficult because I didn't have all the information necessary of each project, and I had to interpret some parts of them. Here we can see some plates that I created to present this material in a similar scale and a graphic way. Here we can see some of the houses. And then after the redraw, I started the creation of the physical model using laser cutter. At this time, this research was the first one in FAUSP to use this technology. FAUSP didn't have this machine at this time, and I had to use the lab at Unicamp. Nowadays, it's a very popular technology and a useful machine among students and professors. This technology helped a lot to construct the physical models. I designed each piece of the model in the AutoCAD program and sent to the laser cutter. After that, I set the pieces together to create the physical model. The laser cutter was very useful in this process. Here are some examples of these physical models. With these physical models, I could understand the space and form of the projects individually and also the group. The next step involved the graphic analysis of each project with drawings and diagrams to understand every design solution that I could and the organization of the architectural program. Here are some examples of the plates that I created. And finally, I organized comparative tables analysis of the group, which allowed me to take some conclusions over the set of the projects. I organized comparative tables about some special subjects, as for example, courtyard houses, houses with ramps, and so that I could reach some outcomes and conclusions. Here are some examples of these comparative tables. Projects with arts and so on. From this research, I could understand that the study of unbuilt projects contributed to a better understanding of Artigas architecture as a whole, and also the methodology adopted in the analysis of unbuilt projects with drawings and physical models was fundamental for the study and understanding of these projects. Some papers were published about this research, and also a book was published in 2017. The second research that I mentioned was developed between 2013 and 2014, also with financial support of CNPq. At the end of my PhD thesis, I started another research now with Professor Wilson Florio. I'd like to continue the investigation about unbuilt Artigas, but with new objects and another tools, procedures, and methods of analysis. In this new research, we selected a group of unbuilt projects designed by Vila Nova Artigas in Brazil, involving houses, schools, and administrative buildings. 12 unbuilt projects available on the digital FAUSP library were analyzed with simulations and animations aiming to investigate these spaces through the virtual tours and relating these designs with the architect's beauty work. The focus of this research was to understand the design strategies of Vila Nova Artigas, especially from the 50s and later on, with special attention in the vertical section to understand his strategies. In this workflow, we can see the methodology of this research. The first step was also the research and survey in the archives of the FAUSP library to get the original drawings. After careful observation of the drawings, it was selected 12 unbuilt projects to investigate. These projects were redrawn and as an important part of the analysis and understanding of the material. A creation of the digital model to produce the renderings and animations, and then the analysis and the identification and understanding of Artigas design strategies at the end of the research. Here we can see some of the original drawings, some of the images that we produced during the research, and focusing the vertical section. And the analysis revealed 80 design strategies, which could be more clear by the vertical section analysis. So we can see here in these images, and the strategies we can read here in this part: a single cover, zenith openings, many types and geometry of columns, adoption of ramps, exploration of intermediate levels, creation of courtyards, alternation of ceiling heights, and demonstration of constructive system. The results allowed us to confirm the mastery of manipulation of the potential of vertical section in Artigas architecture, designed both during the design process, its representation and analysis. Through the observation of the vertical section, we can analyze variations in floor and ceiling heights, levels, voids, spatial relationships, openings, and connections. The redrawing and digital models enable the visualization and analysis of buildings that so far remained unknown. This kind of research calls attention to unknown modern architectural projects. We also could note the importance of the new technologies for the age in the process of analysis and the representation of unbuilt projects. The virtual construction allows for an advanced level of understanding and comprehension of these unbuilt designs, offering original material for the investigation of modern architecture. This research was published in many papers, also many papers, and in this year, in this remarkable book, Digital Modernism Heritage Lexicon, we published a chapter. So I'd like to thank you for your attention, and that's it.
Okay, thank you very much to Anna and Wilson Florio, Anna Tagliari, Wilson Florio. As you can see, there is another, sorry, it's starting again the video. Let me stop it. Okay, great. So I was saying that this is another aspect of our documentation activities, the documentation on unbuilt project. We have a special feelings with Anna and Wilson because we are developing the same project along with Federica Maietti in the documentation of modern architecture with our students here in Ferrara, developing BIM models and analysis of both built and unbuilt architectures. Especially unbuilt, in my opinion, are very interesting because they are the most in danger in terms of loss of memory, because they are unborn children and they actually remain on the paper, and we are forgetting very quickly this this memory of buildings that could have been masterpieces, and at the end they weren't. So thanks again for sharing with us this contribution. I think we are a little bit late, yes, not much, but I'd like to introduce you the last presenter of this very dense evening. Or okay, let me share the slide. So the last one is Sanket Matre. Thanks again, Sanket, for joining us today. He's a practicing architect, very busy in Mumbai. Congratulations for your work. He was awarded Louis Kahn Gold Medal by CEP University. He deals with natural environment and sensory qualities of design. He teaches as well at the IS College of Architecture in Mumbai as a Chaitra Sharad. So please, Sanket, if you want to start.
Thank you, Luca, for inviting me here and for this very nice and elaborate introduction. I'll just share my screen. I hope this is visible.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So I'll try to present this in a very concise manner as much as possible. So this collection is about a pair of exercises which we conducted at the College of Architecture some few years ago. And apart from it being perhaps an assimilation of research by various faculties and students, it is also an effort to understand the architecture of India, particularly modern, but a group of buildings which were built post-independence, that is later 1947. The role over here was to understand architecture very critically, because here the exercise was mainly conducted for the student education. So the aims were here to understand the role of design beyond the primary problem solving, the connection of any building beyond its built form to larger setting as such. How does this design engages the user through social and cultural lens? The contribution of any architecture as it is a piece of past through history, through the various noteworthy works, and also the mistakes which may have conducted in this process. The important reason is also to understand design as a flight of innovation than the mere act of building. And perhaps the best or the very crucial learning over here is that learning or understanding which is gained when engaged in actual experience of space. And to continue with this inquiry, like we had referred to an interesting framework of inquiry by Leonard Bachmann in his book Constructing an Architect, in which he talks about various forces which are crucial for any kind of design inquiry. Part of it, which is like research and design, which are essential transformations of each other, but they also lead to new architectural language, as against the education and the forensics, which are connective configurations, but they are an application of knowledge that currently exists. And when we couple both of them together in different kind of scenarios, there are various learnings that can come henceforth, as stated by by Mr. Bachmann over here. Is like design and education can be poetic, but it can be taught, learned, and advanced. So there is certain kind of value which is associated with it. In case of education and research, there involves multiple theories, standards, methods. So it's practically a zone for scholarly arguments. In case of forensic and research, the focus is more on kind of practical realities, and the evidences are seen as results. So it involves a lot of principles as such. And about when the forensics and design are put together, it involves a lot of experiential learning. So over here, the involvement of stakeholders is also a must because it caters to the field directly. So going ahead from this framework of inquiry, the design research was thought about the progress of this study beyond mere visual documentation. Today, the lot of documentation is available in form of drawings, photographs, sketches, which is like a visual media. So, but how can the study go ahead from here was the basic inquiry of the exercises that we conducted. How it can also give an understanding of context through its various layers. We also thought about different methods to analyze the built form and the collection of literature that was already here, how to assess it and what could be its role for further review. The focus was also on noteworthy findings, but as well as how understandings could also take place in an actual experience of the space, because that's where the exact knowledge exists. And this led to perhaps a reinstated focus on physical models as design learning essential, because they recreate these kind of experiences which I earlier spoke about. Through actual designing, they do not only act as tests for like tools to test the ideas and thoughts, but they also communicate with oneself here being the designer, also with the others. In this could be other designers or the other stakeholders. These can also be used to analyze and compare design sensibilities of a particular piece of architecture or a group of buildings together. They also serve value to acknowledge and control design complexities through various stages of design, or even the aftermath of design. They can also be learned to understand the historical pieces of architecture. So and over here we have another photograph from the Florence Museum, describing, demonstrating the dome which was built, the model of dome which was built by Brunelleschi. Taking these lessons ahead, an exercise was formed, which was labeled as decoding precedents, which would focus purely on architecture of India built post independence. Many of these buildings include creations during modern movement, but it does not limit to that. It also goes ahead and also focuses on certain group of buildings even built after that, even during the very later part of the 20th century. So an intent over here was broadly to create an awareness about the architecture, which I've just mentioned, to the students and other stakeholders. Apart from only making the models of the exact buildings as it is, we also instigated students to explore the various abstract, contemplative, and rational values of the institutes which were built during that time frame. The premise over here was to understand and communicate the meaning of architecture of that time, and also its capacity to realize the design innovation. The entire exercise was to sensitize students about evolution of various values of the modern and then later the contemporary architecture, and understand where it is heading towards. And also the aftermath was to strengthen the design articulation of the students by embodying these values as compared to the visual characteristics or visual lessons which merely come due out of the various media which is available in this present virtual world. The process was quite meticulous. It involved the identification of important places and relevant buildings around or in these places. And the next step was classification of distinct architectural aspects with respect to context, time, and the region in which these buildings were built. Afterwards, physical visits ensured the experience of these buildings, the direct experience as both the students and teacher can collectively have. Then the observation of the same buildings through various lenses. I will just elaborate about that further. And involvement, it also involved the interaction with the stakeholders, the users of the building in the current times, to understand how they occupy the space, their involvement with the buildings, as the buildings, most of the buildings were also built decades ago. And hence, forward students also experienced their immediate findings through sketches, diagrams, which were also debated on the spot during when the study was ongoing in the building. So here you see an image of a dialogue between students and faculties taking place in the basement space of Sept University. And some of the sketches describing the very quick kind of observations which student came across. Then onwards, the crucial part was the preparation of physical models describing the various aspects studied during the visit. Again, to reinstate, the goal over here was to look at individual aspects rather than to look at the complete building as it is, in order to understand the comparative understanding between one or more building, what were the reasons or what were the kind of articulation that took place in the same case as such. So the students, when they came back to Mumbai in their studio, they worked on the models to exhibit their lessons of various architectural aspects. The further on, these aspects did not remain only in studio. We tried to get them on the common platform, which was the exhibition space of the college, where the entire assembly of various kind of models, if you can see in this picture, was made, also with certain kind of documentation to let the audience see and understand the various kind of nomenclature and aspects through which these were studied. Before the exhibition was opened, also as a culmination to the exercise, students came together and they tried to understand these various aspects through each other. Earlier till this stage, they had worked in groups and they were divided in groups of as per different aspects. So they had worked in the groups. At this particular time, they came together and shared the knowledge with each and every group. Groups also try to understand and superimpose different aspects each other in order to understand what would be the collective understanding of these aspects for a particular building. During the exhibition, the knowledge was also shared with different classes and teachers from the college, also the visiting teachers and students from the other college, where it had a certain kind of engagement further for various lessons that can also were shared amongst the different colleges as such. It was also documented using the same models and photographs through various softwares as a part of the documentation. And the same thing was also displayed during the exhibition for a reinforced kind of a summary. Just to run through the various architectural aspects that were studied, I just go through these photographs. They are more or less very basic, but also very crucial. Like for example, movement and connectivity over here expresses various kinds of visual connectivity and movement patterns that were engaged while like using these kind of buildings. This model exhibits the various visual connection between multi-level design that was shaping. Another aspect was arrangement of spaces. So this is a diagram, this is a model of Miller's Institute, in which one can see the fluid spaces and organic spatial geometry is taking place, whereas the form from outside was having a complete different geometry as such. This was designed by Corbusier. Another aspect which normally does not come out of the entire model of a building is the quality of space, which talks about the configuration of the space inside and its connection to the immediate. Over here, the students try to recreate their experience of these individual spaces, which they had studied in the cities and the buildings which they had visited. Structure and details talked about the various kind of technical factors that involved during that particular time. Apart from the build, students also focused on what was happening around the build form, such as the courtyards, open spaces, the ratios between the various kind of voids. Also, another point of importance from climate is the way transition used to take place from outside to in for a particular group of buildings. And also what Chaitra previously mentioned in the presentation are the human values or the intangible values, how humans would occupy, or how basically users would occupy any given spaces in the campus, or how these spaces would be shaped by mere kind of like articulation of their artistic activities. Very important aspect of this particular period is also its identity, a kind of image it would serve to the entire like region, because this was also the time when thoughts were about what would be the architecture of the country, of the nation, or of the particular region. So one group also focused upon what would be the identity aspect of this particular place and time. And last, to end with how students also looked at the superimposition of various aspects of the building. I'm taking only one example over here of Jawahar Palakendra designed by Charles Correa. So earlier you saw the model of form. This is about spaces, the movement, the arrangement of spaces as such, and lastly, the various aspects of which govern the image or imageability of the building. Our intention did not only end at documentation, but also to understand how students could take benefit of this in their individual work. So here is a couple of images describing how students learn from these aspects and try to include them in their own design deliberation. So some students working on arrangement of spaces and quality of spaces. Here is a case where the student tried to contemplate what could be the ideal moment for design of an institute. And perhaps he was enamored by this entire exercise when he chose to draft his final drawings on a piece of veneer, which you can see at the bottom here. Another student tried to understand the combination of structure and arrangement of spaces, and how further you see the evolution of it in its final design. So in order to conclude, the exhibitions, which we titled as Decoding Precedents, provided a vital form for the awareness of architecture of a modern movement and beyond. It expressed the knowledge of various crucial aspects of design almost as it would be experienced in person. The outcome reinforced a dialogue regarding the evolution of architecture from the modern movement to present, and how it also serve a link between to the certain lessons from history. The process does help the students to realize experiential values of design and its contribution to architectural language. So, and also perhaps one more point which I may miss out, it also served as an awareness of this period, not only for the students, but also to other visitors that we have had, not only architects and students from the other faculty, but also this was visited by other stakeholders like the primary school, and also experts and professionals from different fields as such. And few more slides to acknowledge the people who helped us realize this exhibition by allowing us to visit this their premises and institutes in order to study. To various teachers who participated in this process of documentation, and also to the management and the staff of college. The important people are the students who contributed with their rigor and their presence of mind to articulate this study further. Yeah, and these are the references. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanket. Congratulations for your work, hard work with the students. I think it's very interesting, and I think that some keywords that you said, such as evolution, understanding, I think they are part of our common interest. I remember I organized a conference in Kathmandu when I was attending my internship at the UNESCO there, we organized this conference called Understanding Heritage Changing. And I think that the first thing is to understand cultural heritage beside vernacular, modern, every kind of cultural heritage, but also be able to, in order to be able to change it, to adapt the transformation with in a proper way. As Michele Canata said and Fatima said, we are allowed to slightly change cultural heritage to make it more livable for the population. So I appreciated that you brought the students to talk with the stakeholders, to the owners, to the users. I think it's an important relation for them to understand the needs and be aware of what you can change slightly to make the building still usable. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, Luca.
You're welcome. So I think we are at the end of the meeting. I don't know if someone wants to add some questions. It's quite late for you guys in India. So I just want to thanks everybody, especially Professor James for the beautiful keynote speech. I remember you that we went through the professionals working on the restoration on site, Michele and Fatima, to a more cultural approach, technological approach by Felipe Corres Melachos, who showed us the potential of also the modeling techniques in order to understand the relation between the context and the climate. Alessandro Luigini offered a very interesting philological and graphic approach to the analysis of Oscar Niemeyer work. Chaitra, a human-centered approach, which is very, very important. And Anna Wilson Florio, the importance of preserving the memories of the architects also through the protection of the unbuilt architects, these unborn entities. And I think you can get close with the chance, the need to involve young students in this process, making them aware of the importance of preserving every kind of cultural heritage, as we, I hope we did in Jodhpur together, and also with Professor Meenakshi Jain in the past years. I think concluding, the Inside Modern Heritage Network has, I hope, future and feasible goals that could be to enlarge the network internationally. So if everyone is interested in taking part, it's welcome. We have to define at the same time an high-level scientific committee with the good person that are able to testify the quality of the network work. We can identify also funding programs. I'm already working on it to have funds to organize events in a place, not only on the internet. We have to plan a second meeting in 2022 for sure. I'm already talking with the Brazilian colleagues, because for them, 2022 will be the first anniversary of a century from the week of 1922, which was one of the starting point for modernism in Brazil, Semana do 22. So probably we can also focus a special meeting on this topic. And then I'd like to develop research groups focused on specific topics. Now we know more or less what the others are working on, so this could be something that we can develop further in the future. I want to thank you again for sharing your time with us, you speakers, and also the attendees. And if someone wants to add something, or if not, we can close the meeting here.
Just want to say thank you so much for inviting us. And I think this is a great initiative. Modernism is, I think we need to start thinking about it, and it's very nascent at this point of time. So modern heritage needs to be given its new, its due importance. So thank you, Luca.
Yep.
Looking forward to the future.
Sure. Thank you very much to everybody. Hope to see you soon. No.
I think it's in a short time.
Yeah.
And I think the entire presentation is, I would say, more than my expectation. So I thought it would be a kind of a meeting and a discussion, but I think very nice presentations made by everybody. Congratulations to you and everybody.
Thank you very much. I wanted to put together different, very, very different views to show us that it's possible to work in a multidisciplinary way, as we have to do, in my opinion. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Hope to see you soon in India, in Brazil.
Anyway.
In Brixen.
In Brixen. Thanks, Alessandro.
Thank you, Luca. Congratulations for the organization.
We are going to meet in Milan very soon. So
congratulations
we are lucky.
To all. Great presentations.
Thanks,
nice
Renata.
to meet you all too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And welcome in Ferrara. Renata is in Ferrara with us. So we are looking forward to work together.
Thank you.
Bye, Felipe.
Nice to meet you all.
Thanks
Ciao.
again.
Obrigado, Luca.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Nice to meet you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Ciao, ciao.